Welcome to the very first Glazers Presents The Power of Red. My name is James Lucarelli, and on today's session, we're going to go ahead and learn a little bit more about the power of Red, the 3 Rs, the current Red camera offerings, both the DSMC2 and the Ranger, and we're also going to learn about how we can utilize the available resources from both Glazers and Red to fully utilize all of the camera systems and learn a little bit more about the Red products. Now I want to go ahead and look down to the comments real quick, make sure that everyone is seeing and hearing me live, and if I'm spinning my wheels, that's what I'm doing right now, just making sure that everything is correct. But I do want to point out that there are some associates from both Glazers and from Red that will be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions or if I'm going just a tad too fast, please feel free to chat your question. They'll be able to answer that or at least elevate that up to me if it is a pertinent question. We do try and keep these sessions right around 30 minutes or less with some Q&A time at the end. So I will open it up for questions, and just know that I'll show you a couple other resources to help you learn at your own pace. Now without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Now right off the bat, you should be seeing red.com and then a current page here with a little shout out to the Red Solitary series, which is our completely free online education. If you click that link right there, you can see 9 videos that both myself and my associate Jonathan Petz have created. There will be more videos coming out here in the near future that will coincide with our new camera release. And maybe we say something here in the chat that sounds like gobbledygook to you, you don't quite know what it means. Notice I just went here to red.com support. I could talk about IPP2 and maybe you didn't quite understand what that meant. And just notice there's a number of articles or white pages right here on red.com support that'll allow you to come back and learn at your own pace. Let's go ahead and jump right into the Power of Red presentation. And once again, if you have any chat or questions, please feel free to enter those into the comment section, and my associates will go ahead and elevate those up to me. Now, right off the bat, you should be seeing the power of Red, and anytime you think about the power of Red, I want you to remember R's and 3 R's: resolution, REDCODE, and reliability, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. First, it's good to know a little bit about the history of Red. Way back in 2006, our creator Jim Gennard and founder brought the very first Red 1 camera to NAB, and guys like Fincher and Soderbergh and Ridley Scott were maybe the first couple customers to put down their initial deposit. That was way back in 2006. Flash forward to today, and you're now seeing our current camera systems in every major production across all the way across the globe. Now, I do want to go ahead and point out that this is a very good slide to understand the evolution of Red, because this slide shows you both our camera brains on the top as well as our evolution of our sensors here on the bottom. So Red was a little bit different in that we would have a camera body and then a sensor. There was an A and a B, and this would also allowed you to have maybe a Red 1 or a DSMC with maybe potentially the same Mysterium X 5K sensor. Just know that as we've continued to evolve and get more efficient and grow the technology with our camera bodies, our sensors have developed as well. And the nice thing about Red is, with our current offerings, you can see our DSMC2, or Digital Still Motion Camera 2, which is a very modular system that allows you to get to that very small form factor or perhaps build it larger. And then you have your Ranger camera system here, which offers 3 out of the 4 sensors that come in the DSMC2 camera body. And it also allows for things like fixed I/O, so you don't have to necessarily build and bring all those additional modules. It does have a more efficient power system, as well as cooling systems that offer a much, much quieter system, and we'll learn a little bit more about that. Now, what is DSMC? And you may have heard me say it here just a second ago. DSMC2, or DSMC, stands for Digital Still Motion Camera. This is the version 2.1, and notice that right here above the sensor, or right here above the lens mount, you will see what particular sensor is in the camera, and that does allow you to have multiple sensors in the same camera body, kind of like how you would choose a film stock with maybe your previous camera system. The key point here with this modular system is it is a very small footprint, right around 3.5 pounds or just under 3.5 pounds as it's shown right here. But do note that you could build this up with a bunch of different modules for a number of different configurations, and I'll show that here in just a second. And the other benefit of this camera system is it's dual simultaneous record. So essentially, if you have that client that wants either ProRes or RAW, or Avid and RAW, you can essentially record both file formats to the same camera system, and you're not having to do a swap later in post or reconnect. I'm going to go ahead and show you one of the advantages of this camera systems here in this next slide here. And really what you're going to see here is all of the many ways that you can go ahead and build up that DSMC2 camera into multiple configurations. And what we just saw there was a bunch of different ways at how you could configure that DSMC2 modular camera system to get the production needs you want. Now you're going to see a couple of image examples of that same DSMC2 modular camera system on some of the biggest productions to date. You can see it here on Aeronauts, and then Portrait of a Lady, as well as in that very small form factor rig there. You can see the guy in the helmet there. That was from Extraction, as well as the two popes there down at the bottom. I believe that is also the Dark Crystal there in the lower right-hand corner, and really all of these cameras that you're looking at, unless I can read the top, essentially the sensor could be completely interchanged between all of these different camera bodies. I do know for the most part here, the ones you're looking at were for the most part Monstro. Now here's a great slide to kind of get a better understanding of RED's current sensor offerings. Now you're going to currently see 4 RED sensors here, and you're going to notice for the most part they are that 241 or twice as wide as they are tall. The exception to that is the Gemini sensor, which is a little bit more square in its aspect ratio, but that's going to be more beneficial for shooting with things like anamorphic lenses. I also do want to point out that we have our Helium, Dragon, and Gemini sensors. These are our 3 Super 35 sensors. Our Monstro is our one full-frame sensor, but I don't want to pigeonhole the Monstro to just be full-frame. The Monstro is also Super 35 capable. You just would have to go down to about 6K resolution. Now, I just mentioned the Monstro right here, and really that's the same sensor that's currently in the Panavision DXL2. It allows for 8K full frame all the way up to 60 frames per second, as well as all the other frame rates and capabilities that you've come to know with the DSMC2 camera system. It offers that all with a 17 plus stops of dynamic range, improved shadow detail, and more lens flexibility than you're going to get with pretty much any other system on the planet, just by the fact that you're going to have that large full frame sensor that you can also go down into Super 35 mode. So once again, I don't want it to only be in full frame. You can use this camera in 6K, which would be the equivalent of Super 35. I'm going to show you a couple of options here, or a couple of great examples of recent productions that were shot on Monstro, and really a lot of these shows I believe a lot of us have seen, and they're gorgeous shows. And really whenever someone wants to talk about skin tone or overall improved clarity or detail, I'm going to play for you a little Monstro reel here, and I really want you to soak in just some of those skin tones and some of those organic imagery that you're going to see with that full frame sensor combined with some gorgeous lenses. really incredible stuff. I don't know about you guys and girls at home, but just watching something like that, having that nice inspiring soundtrack, it's hard for me to sit here in the desk and not want to go out and shoot, but that's really what we try and convey with the Monstro and the 8K. I hear comments of, it looks like I'm in real life, it looks like I could reach through the screen and touch it, and really that's one of the benefits you're going to have with shooting that extra resolution and then eventually downsampling or super sampling in post. You're now seeing our helium, which is our Super 35 8K sensor. And if I went up 2 slides, notice the only thing that really changed here is the size of the sensor and this front of the camera. Everything else on the DSMC2 unified body is the exact same. This allows me to shoot that same 8K 60, as well as all the other high frame rates that the DSMC2 camera allows for, with 16 plus stops of dynamic range, coupled with all of the same color control that we would have had with that Monstro sensor, but now just in a Super 35 option. Really great if you don't have full frame lenses, or you really love those Summicrons and you're never going to make them magically become full frame. You could go ahead and shoot with your Helium Super 35 and still get all of that benefits of 8K resolution. Now this is a very popular sensor for our streaming shows, so that way they can shoot 8K frame for 6 and still have a 4K in there where they can pull a very usable final deliverable. You're going to see a couple of great examples over here on the left, and a couple of examples that pair nicely with some other camera systems here as well. So just know that that Helium sensor is a very, very powerful sensor here that is still able to shoot 8K at a very, very cost-efficient price point. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the Gemini sensor. This is the first sensor that does offer the dual sensitivity. It is the first sensor that is a little bit outside of that 2:1 aspect ratio, but once again that allows it for a little bit better for anamorphic recording. The Gemini is the one RED camera that does allow for that dual sensitivity. Essentially it can record in standard mode, where you still have the same 16 plus stops of dynamic range, or in low light mode. The difference here is about a 2-stop shift into protecting your shadow or your highlight details, and really this is something that I would encourage you all to check out, and I can show you where you can find that on red.com's download page, or maybe come on down to Glazers and you can get hands-on with one of the camera systems. Now here's some great examples of Gemini, and I just realized I said come on down to Glazers. I want to make sure that I'm being respectful and everyone's being healthy here, so my associates in the chat can confirm whether or not Glazers is open for hands-on demos. You probably have to schedule, but that's why we have our associates in the chat. You're seeing some great examples of shows that were shot on the Gemini sensor, and really a great sensor if you are shooting maybe non-scripted, or if you are walking into an environment where you can't quite control the lighting because you'll scare the big cats or whatever else you're shooting. That is where the Gemini sensor really is going to allow you to win out, because you can shoot both in standard mode and that low light mode. And back by popular demand, kind of like how a film company would reintroduce a film stock, we have reintroduced the Dragon sensor to the DSMC2 unified bodies. Notice that even this image here hasn't been updated. It still says 5K. The sensor is a 19.4 6K sensor. It was always a 6K sensor. We just were now enabled with the DSMC2 unified body, excuse me, to allow for a firmware upgrade to allow customers to utilize that full sensor. That would have to be a DSMC2 Dragon X, and that would be a completely free upgrade. If there's any questions on that, you can feel free to chat us, or go ahead and email me at solitaryseries@red.com. And Dragon, once again, a very tried and true sensor. It was our flagship sensor at one time. You can see a number of great films here, including some award-winning films from that award-winning sensor. Now, Ranger is, we just showed you how you could pick your sensor, kind of like how you would pick a film stock. Ranger versus DSMC2 is now allowing you to pick your camera system. If you're a rental house, if you're an A camera on a studio budget, if you're someone that does not like to constantly tinker with your plates or your configurations, the Ranger is going to be a wonderful camera system for you. Notice that it is a all-in-one full feature body here, and really your only flavors are a V-mount or a gold mount option with 3 different sensor options. The great thing about this camera system is it has the same sensors, the same REDCODE, all of the same frame rates and capabilities as the DSMC2 camera system. It's now just incorporated that into a full feature all-in-one body that has much better thermal control, so you don't hear those fans kick up nearly as much. You're going to have fixed things like 4 physical SDIs on the camera body, camera right where everyone wants it, as well as a 24-volt power system, which can allow for much better power distribution if you are having third-party devices and accessories. Now, I do want to go ahead and play a very nice REDTech that's going to go ahead and elaborate just a little bit more on the DSMC2 versus the Ranger.
Hey, welcome back to REDTech. Clay here, and today we're talking about our brand new updates to the Red Ranger camera system. It's now available with our Helium 8K and Gemini 5K sensors. That's right, we heard you, and not only are our award-winning sensors now available in the Ranger's high-end unibody design, but unlike our rental-only Ranger with Monstro 8K VV sensor, these 2 variations will be available for purchase directly through red.com or any of our authorized dealers. But that's not all I wanted to talk about. I also want to look at why you might want Ranger over our DSMC2 lineup, and frankly, why some of you might not. Ranger offers a lot. It's dialed in for the configurations used on your favorite films and television shows, but at a price and availability you have access to. Ranger's great for a techno crane or a dolly, but you might have a hard time flying this bad boy in your average gimbal. Okay. Let's quickly break down some of the major differences when comparing Red Ranger and the DSMC2 camera system. And we'll see who comes out ahead. The first obvious place to look is the size difference. So what does it matter if your camera is large or compact? A lot, actually. Say you need to fit the camera in a closed camera system like the shot over f1. The flexibility and modularity of the DSMC2 system obviously wins out here. But size also really matters when we talk about heat control. The Ranger's unibody design has a single larger fan that moves air in the camera more effectively and quietly. So if you're rolling super long dialogue takes and you value your relationship with the sound guy, having a fan that's 4 times less noisy, it definitely matters. I guess that makes it 1-to-1. So what about industry standards and complexity in prep? I'm looking at you, camera team. How do you power that Preston without built-in 3-pin ports? How are you going to mount all your accessories without space and the standard mounting points? Forget that. How are you going to maintain stability powering it all off a block battery if you don't have a 24-volt system? You can make it work, but you need a bunch of extra GAC and modules, and that's why Ranger ticks those boxes. These are the scenarios we designed Ranger around. That's another point for the big guy. But if you imagine now that you have to take all of that up to the top of a mountain and hike and follow an animal, an actor, or an athlete, forget that. I'll take my DSMC2 handheld setup 10 times out of 10. I guess that's tied up. With the DSMC2 system, you have the ability to adjust the sensor plane and back focus, increasing your configurability. But the Ranger's shim PL mount and fixed sensor, it gives you more stability. Ranger has simple and standardized integrated I/O, and the DSMC2 system allows you to adapt to the exact I/O configuration you need. We could go back and forth battling all day because in Ranger versus DSMC2, no one loses. Everyone wins. In Hammer versus Screwdriver, who wins? I guess it depends on if you have nails or screws. They're different tools and they were purpose-built to do different things. That's why we created the Red Ranger and the DSMC2 camera systems, because each tool has a job to do, and the question is, what's your next job? All right, thanks for tuning in. Hit subscribe if you want to know when the next REDTech drops, and go shoot something.
Thank you so much, Clay. Great video there, and really it's not a versus, it's a very complementary camera system here, and that's what we're currently seeing. Now, I mentioned it earlier, Ranger does come in 3 sensor options, Monstro, Helium, and Gemini. It is not currently available in the Dragon sensor, but that Dragon X kit, or that DSMC2 Dragon, is still fully available, and all of these 3 Ranger bodies are currently available through Glazers as well. Just very quickly, I'll go right through the Helium and Gemini Ranger stats. Notice that it's that same 35.4 8K megapixel sensor, all of the same frame rates and data rate capabilities here, and you're going to see the same dual sensitivity for the Gemini sensor. Once again, it's just the Gemini sensor and the Ranger body, and that's what allows you to pick your body. I like a Ranger, maybe you like a DSMC2. pick your sensor. I personally own a helium, but maybe for the low light job, I'm going to utilize the Gemini sensors, dual sensitivity. That is where you get to have your situational sensors. I'm going to go ahead and skip this because we already watched this video. And I did want to go ahead and talk a little bit about that first R. Now, whenever we're talking red, resolution is the first thing that typically we like to land on. Why? Because we were the only ones that had 8K cameras for the longest time, and really we have two 8K offerings right now in both helium and Monstro at 35 megapixels, and then we also have a 6K and a 5K option. Both of those are Super 35. Now, for any of you still shooters out there like myself, I also have the megapixels as well as the resolution, right? When I say 8192 by 4120, that's 8192 lines this way by 4320 that way. That's 8K. Same thing as 6K being that 6192 by that many this way. So just know that when we talk about resolution, typically the largest leading or the width is when we talk about the K, but oftentimes megapixels is that length times width that we're all familiar with. And I do want to point out that when you go from 8K to 6K, that's not just slapping a 2K or a 2 megapixel onto that 6K to equal 8K. No, simple math isn't going to work here, because notice as we change our resolution from maybe 4K to 6K, we're doubling our resolution. Same thing is true here when we go from 6K to 8K. You're about 44% larger in your resolution. Still photographers, would you rather shoot 20 megapixels or would you rather shoot 35 megapixels? I think we'd all rather shoot 35 megapixels. The difference would just be in file size, and that's where REDCODE gets to come in, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I did want to bring this up just in case your client is maybe asking you for 4K, and I'll ask you, well, how do you stabilize 4K if you're shooting in 4K? You don't. You have to shoot in 5K and then stabilize down to 4K. Same thing with 6K. How do you stabilize 6K if you're delivering in 6K? That's where I'd recommend shooting 8K, and you have all that extra resolution to stabilize in post, or maybe super sample or reframe, and I'll show you a couple of reasons to do that here. And here's a great example, right? If you've watched previous Red reels, you've maybe seen this shot in our 8K reel, but maybe we're doing a skin product and I really want to hammer home that my moisturizer is going to get rid of your alligator skin. I hope that's not the case here, but notice that this is my 35 megapixel image, and I'm still able to punch in or window in on that sensor and find that 9 megapixel 4K shot, or maybe that 20 megapixel 6K shot, and really that allows me to say maybe we don't like his tongue cropped out. I could expand that image a little bit lower and have my framing be changed. So I'm not advocating always rechanging your framing. I'm just letting you know that's an option when you end up shooting more resolution than you currently are delivering in. Same thing can be said about maybe we're shooting this wonderful desert landscape, and that rock that you see there in the distance is not a rock. Maybe it's a Starbucks cup or something that we didn't mean to bring on set, or maybe that's a logo of someone that or some company that we cannot use. I would much rather be able to isolate that rock, layer mask it out, and remove it than if I shot that in 4K or 9 megapixels or in 2K 2 megapixels. You're going to have a lot harder time retaining that image fidelity if you are doing any post work. Same thing here for any of you still photographers, things like that, where you are going to want to punch in, or maybe natural history to study the receptors on this gecko's eye. That is why our camera is vastly popular with our Nat Geographic shooters and companies like that, because essentially both of these circles are in focus, but which one of them is sharp, and that is where the 8K is always going to win out over 4K, because there is more pixels, right? How do you do round things with square pixels? You do it with more of them. Same thing can be true when we're talking about color fidelity. Right? When we were talking earlier and we were showing our 4 different sensors, that is what we call a Bayer pattern, and that means there's twice as much twice as much green as there is blue and red. I misspoke there. Bayer pattern has twice as much green as it does blue and red. What you're seeing here is maybe a sample of a little bit of skin tone here, and if we would have shot that at 4.5K, notice that really I'm using only about 2 of those photo sites to come up with that color. If I'm doing that in 8K and using all of the sensor and all of that information, all of those individual photo sites, look at all of those potential colors that could come together to make what might be that skin tone, right? I have much more color bits in here to sample that color, and it's going to look a lot more true to our eyes, even if we do deliver in a smaller format, because I captured more of that information in 8K than I would have in 4K or a lesser resolution. Now, I want to show you a great example for reframing, and I mentioned it earlier. I'm not advocating shoot 8K and then willy-nilly changing your shot in post, but this is a very creative way that I've seen either House of Worships, or maybe this is a car mount where we didn't want to have to mount 3 cameras on the car to get 1 4K shot, 2 4K shot, and then a 2 shot here. Really, 1 8K camera is allowing us to get 3 shots, and I'm going to go ahead and let this play for you here, and you can see that. Once again, this is a great tool. I'm not advocating reframing or doing punch-ins on all of your shots. Just a great assist. And I don't know if you noticed that, but the 4K shots, even the punch-ins were even a tad more stabilized because you have all of that extra resolution to there. You can really make sure that that frame doesn't move at all and really just retains that. Now I'm going to show you another benefit for shooting 8K, and that is super sampling, right? Now that is the ability to shoot 35 megapixels and then deliver in 20 rather than shooting 20 megapixels and delivering in 20, or shooting 2 megapixels and delivering in 20. What we're talking about is upsampling, or just enough, or what I'm advocating here is super sampling, right? Shoot more than what you necessarily need when it comes to clarity, when it comes to resolution, and here's what we're seeing here. If you see this 8K shot, look at this corner of her face, and notice maybe this pole right here. If I didn't want that pole growing out of her face, I can easily layer mask that out because I have a nice clean edge here. If I did that in 4K, I lose some of that clean edge. It's a little bit softer, and definitely you can see that here in 2K because mathematically this is only 2 megapixels or 10 megapixels rather than 35. I would much rather use 35 megapixels, and I know what you're thinking. Those files might be massive, but they're really not, and that's the beauty of RED, and we're going to talk a little bit more, and that's in the second R when we talk about REDCODE. Excuse me. Now, the third option that you can also use all that extra resolution for is super sampling, right? This is a great example of that, and if any of you are video shooters, you should be getting a little bit nervous right now because I'm seeing inside a car underneath a bridge. That's a very challenging shot, especially at night with a black interior, and really I'm going to show you some side-by-side examples of 8K, 4K, and 2K, and why don't you let your eyes be the judge on what would be the best overall image. Notice how our depth of field and our magnification and separation changes as well. The detail in Clay's arm and its tattoo right here rather than 2K or 4K. Raw. Now, when you're talking about REDCODE, REDCODE is RED's form of in-camera RAW recording that allows us to shoot very, very high resolution, high bit depth, ultra high quality RAW information, but have it also be customizable and flexible and accessible in all of the NLEs. And what you're seeing here is a breakout of Red Cine X. I can show you where you can download that for free on your own. And notice that we're adding 3D LUTs here. We're changing our ISO, we're changing our color temperature, and all of this is stuff that's typically very heavy and labor intensive, and we're now able to do that all right here through our completely free program. And if you don't want to use this program, you can go directly into Premiere, Resolve, Final Cut, or Avid, or any of your NLEs or nonlinear editing systems, because REDCODE is natively accepted right now in all of those major editing systems. And if you shot with red, you know that really that image, that high image quality and that high dynamic range allows us to essentially shoot something at ISO 800, which, remember, with red cameras, ISO is never baked in. You pretty much have a lifetime supply of ISO 800 film stock. I like to throw that out there. But notice that you're shooting here at ISO 800, and then you could bring that down in post from ISO 800 to 400. That's one stop. And from 400 to 250, that's about a stop and a half. And look at that skin detail. Look at the shadow detail. Look at the highlight here that looked like it was potentially gone. All of that was retained, and that's really because red is raw, or REDCODE is raw, and really ISO and color temperature and white balance and things like that, they're never baked in. So on set, you may really love that natural documentary look of that gritty ballerina changing room, and then later in post decide to maybe brighten it up by about a half a stop, and then change our white balance, and then maybe change the roll-off on our lights to give us a more fashion grade compared to more of a cinema grade. Really, none of this is destructive, and you can do this in any of the NLE or post-editing programs that you like. Now, I oftentimes will hear my camera does RAW, my phone does RAW, the new blankety blank comes out and it also does RAW, and that's where I'll have to ask, but how RAW is your RAW? Because not all RAW is created equal. We are doing 16-bit RAW with REDCODE. Essentially, that gives us billions of possible tones compared to your millions. And really, I think we've all seen some of this posterization, this light blue, slightly darker blue, and this posterization effect you get from 8-bit or 10-bit color. And that's really, if you want to look at the math behind that, that's because when we shoot 16-bit RAW, we have 281 trillion possible tones compared to your billions and millions with 8-bit, 10-bit, or 12-bit. Now, once again, I heard us say it earlier, I know that it's going to come up as what about your file size? And really, that's where red wins out, because if you wanted to look at us comparatively, this is a very great slide to look at. Notice that this is 8K uncompressed because there are other manufacturers in the industry, and we do have customers asking about uncompressed. We could do uncompressed. It would just fill up a 1 terabyte or a half a terabyte mag in less than 2 minutes. I don't know about you out there, but I don't want to shoot a full terabyte every 4 minutes, and that's what uncompressed RAW is going to give you. With REDCODE, you could shoot something like 5:1, which is essentially what a studio might shoot, or maybe something that if we wanted to zoom in here on this cowboy because we're doing portraits and I want to go ahead and make sure that I get the logo on this gentleman's plaid shirt here, that would be at 5:1, very, very high quality. If I wanted to shoot something maybe for a Netflix or an Amazon or a streaming show, notice we could take that down to 8:1 compression, and notice my data rate is now 160 megabytes a second, when previously it was 5,000 megabytes per second or 260. This customization right here is what allows you to essentially take your mini mag that was running out, or your mag, your media that was filling up every 2 minutes, and make it last another 30 minutes or up to a full hour utilizing REDCODE's flexibility. Now, I did want to go ahead and show a comparison here of both our DSMC2 and then Ranger camera systems here. Notice I have both the Dragon sensor at 6K and then our Helium or Monstro sensor, it doesn't really matter here, at 8K. And I do want to point out that even at 6:1, which is what that Netflix sweet spot would be, notice that our data rate's only 122 megabytes per second, where some of those other camera systems you may be using in the marketplace are shooting 500, 300, maybe double that data rate, and really none of them are shooting 16-bit RAW, and all of them are shooting maybe some lower form of resolution. I dare probably not 8K. And if you wanted to see a total budget, this is where all of that data starts accruing, right? If you wanted to go out and shoot 1,000 hours of footage and compare that with some of the premier camera systems in the marketplace, we're doing 8K, or essentially twice what the resolution is down here, and we're now shooting data that's essentially, terabytes less than the other camera systems, all while doing 16-bit RAW. Now, I wanted to give you some examples of when to use REDCODE and when you can maybe get away with more compression here. And this is a really good slide, and you saw it earlier with the super sampling examples. Now, oftentimes I'll get customers leaning in or trying to zoom in really close, and really you don't have to. If this is 5:1 or 260 megabytes per second, and this is 20:1 or about 60 megabytes per second, well, do we shoot the least or do we shoot the most? Don't shoot the maximums, shoot right in the middle or the sweet spot, and really that's where you can base it off of your deliverable. If you're big budget and you're shooting a feature with a lot of VFX, shoot that 5:1, but remember what I showed you here. Even at 5:1 or 6:1, you're still 200 megabytes compared to the 300, 400s, and 500s of all the other camera systems here. So really, you could shoot that low compression for big budget features. If we're shooting things for Netflix, Amazon, streaming shows like that, that's where that 6:1, 10:1 can typically be your sweet spot. Now, why is there a range? Because notice that we had 4 different sensors, and typically higher resolution sensors like 8K can get away with about 3 more REDCODE compression jumps than your Dragon sensor. I'll show you a really good way that you can calculate this using your data calculator within Red.com's tools. And I do want to point out that you don't necessarily need to go out and shoot 8K and then 6K and then 5K and then 4K tests. Really, shoot the biggest, largest canvas you can, and then utilize REDCODE to control your data rate or your media management. Don't come down in resolution to change your data rate because you're windowing in on your sensor. You're going to have crop factor, and really the best thing to do is utilize your REDCODE. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you this, and this is a really good example of just a static shot here, and we're going to start out first at 5:1 compression, and then go to 10:1, and then to 20:1. A key thing to keep in mind here as we go through these different iterations here is every time I go down a stop or I go from 5 to 10, I just cut my data rate in half, or I doubled the amount of storage we have. So when you see these changes, just notice that I'm halving my data rate, and I'm not really seeing that much in quality loss, maybe just a softening around the edges. So there's your 5:1, there's your 10:1, and now finally your 20:1. And I'll pause it right here. Are you seeing much difference at 20:1? And I don't need to pause it. There's a nice side-by-side coming up where we can, oh gosh, I didn't do a very good job of pausing that there. Let's see if I can just pause that frame. There we go. So 5:1, 10:1, 20:1. This is 60 megabytes per second. This is 260 megabytes. Yes, you should see some softening on those edges, maybe a little bit in the color detail there, but once again, I have quadrupled my storage here. No, we're doing VFX. I don't need to do that, and that's the flexibility of REDCODE. It allows you to customize your file size and maximize your deliverable. Now, the third R with RED is reliability. And I will constantly hear of customers saying, well, do you trust a RED on set? Can you bring that out to the biggest productions? And I say, I don't worry about it, because we have customers like Gabriel Mann here, and he's doing what I would not recommend, which is not use a rain jacket and put this camera in environments that are very, very harsh. But it's pretty incredible to see that, I'll let him speak it in his own words, but here's a camera well outside of our operating temperatures, and he's really pushing it to the extremes here, and we'll let Gabriel speak for himself here.
Filming wildfires is like this nightmare cocktail of everything you don't want anywhere near a camera. It's like a war zone. You got helicopters, flare guns, bombs, jets, fire tornadoes, chainsaws, cable news douchebags with untied boots. I've been baptized so many times by the ships that nothing electronic anywhere near me should work ever again. But the Reds just keep cranking. And I don't use a camera cover, because I'm an idiot. It's a rad paint job. Every single camera I've used on the Fireline has gone down from the heat, except the Reds. So when some bro asks me, would you trust a Red for a big client job? Dude, you're in an air-conditioned studio for 8 hours. I've taken my Reds to the gates of hell. Relax. Things are tanks.
And then to flip that and to go from maybe some of the hottest and most inhospitable places on the earth that are too hot for maybe camera systems to now the opposite of that. I now have, here's my great friend and customer, Marcel, and he was shooting a show up in Alaska that was following these runners, and it is 40 below, and the crew quit before the cameras did, right? It is, you can see him here clearly having his cameras exposed to the elements. No rain jackets on either of these customers, and I do want to be clear here, for anything with snow or rain or whatever that red stuff was, I, as a Red employee, would recommend putting a rain jacket on this camera and not letting it get exposed. Maybe a splash housing or an EWA bag, but yeah, here we're seeing these camera systems in some very, very harsh environments, as well as some very, very cold environments, and at the end of the day, we're still able to get all of those great, great shots, and this is the same camera system that's out there shooting the biggest productions to date, including Mindhunters, The New Hope, Irishman, Stranger Things, and a bunch more. So with that, I want to thank everyone for sitting through that initial 30-plus minutes of Death by PowerPoint, and really I want to open it up to any questions here. I'm pointing at a DSMC2 Gemini that's recording me right now. Right over here to my left is a DSMC2 Monstro that I'm touching right here. This is a DSMC2 helium body that is actually my personal camera body over here to my right. And if anyone has any questions, I'm more than happy to either go through the cameras or the menus, or I even have the Red Control app up as well, so you can see as I maybe change the aperture on the camera, you can see that change there on the app as well. So very, very customizable, and I want to go ahead and move myself into the upper left, so I'm not just a talking hand, and then you can see my demo area over here if anyone has any questions. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in, as well as Kate and Rebecca and Corey and everyone from Glazers. I want to thank you guys as the customers for joining. I'm spinning my wheels here a little bit, waiting for any questions to come in. I'm looking over here on the chat. Really, this is going to be a great time right now for us to all learn a little bit more. I showed everyone where we could utilize the Red Solitary series videos. Those are completely free and able to be downloaded and shared. And we do cover such great things as workflow, camera setup, menus, and all of the stuff that we probably can't get in the tail end of a 15 minutes of Q&A. All right. Well, I'm going to take it back to my camera in full. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. I'm still not seeing any questions, so I'll give it a quick stall for just a few more seconds here, and maybe while I'm doing that, if you notice, that is an HDMI feed coming out of my Monstro right over here to the right. If I maybe wanted to show you guys something in menus, all I have to do over here is triple tap on my touchscreen, and that just gave me the camera controls back over here. And then I can come over here into my monitoring preferences and change my HDMI to the overlay, which should now give you guys all of my menus. And if I wanted to give you a better view of that, you should see me back here in the upper left, and then all of my camera menus over here on the right. And if you're wondering what those frame guides are, that blue, yellow, and pink line that you're seeing there in my footage, and I can make it a little bit more apparent for you, that is a 6.5K, a 6K, and a 4.5K frame guide, all within my 8K resolution that we're shooting right here. And if I take this mini mag, right, this is our Red mini mag, right, this is what Reds record to. You essentially just stick them in right here in the side of the camera. I'm going to do that to the camera that's recording right now. And I wanted to just show you guys a really great way that you can go ahead and maximize what we're doing, and also prove that 8K really isn't as large of a file as you might think. Now notice right now we're shooting 8:1, and I'm going to make that 9:1, and we have 35 minutes left of recording. So this is 8K, right around that Netflix streaming television show deliverable size, right? Maybe something for like an Amazon show. And notice 8K at 9:1, it is still that 16-bit RAW. And notice we have 35 minutes left on the card. You can see that here in the lower right-hand corner. Now I'm going to come over here into the camera and turn on both Red RAW and ProRes, and this is what allows me to shoot dual files at the same time, both RAW and proxy, and this is where I'll get to ask the client, do you want 4K ProRes, 2K ProRes, what flavor? And they'll typically say, give me that 4K 422 HQ ProRes, and once I go ahead and do that, what you should see on your end is look what happened to our time. By turning on 4K ProRes, we have cut our raw recording almost in half. That is where if we wanted to go ahead and maybe turn off ProRes or maybe shoot something like, let's see, maybe a 2K ProRes because we don't need that big 4K ProRes, notice what's going to happen in our total time deliverable. We're now shooting close to 32 minutes when just a second ago we didn't have nearly as much recording time. And this is also something to where I can turn off ProRes altogether because maybe we aren't delivering right now or it's not going to be delivered in the very near future. It's going to be something that we're going to work on and deliver at a later date. And notice that I could change that REDCODE compression to something like, I don't know, like 13 or 14 to 1. Look at that. We now have close to an hour of recording time when previously we only had half an hour. So this is where you can maximize your recording, change your REDCODE, don't change your resolution, which would window in on your sensor. Very, very key concept there, and really wanted to hammer that home because I will hear oftentimes that customers go all the way down in resolution because client just wanted 2K, and that's saying don't go shoot 3K, still shoot the largest bit of the sensor you can, and then use all of that extra wiggle room for super sampling, for post-stabilization, or for just an overall cleaner looking image here. And if the pushback is file size, that is where you can use REDCODE to essentially get your data rate to be smaller than the 4K video that we shoot with our iPhone. So that's pretty powerful stuff right there, that I can shoot 8K 16-bit RAW and have all of the files be very, very small and manageable. And if you're not quite sure on this, I want to show you guys my desktop real quick, and what you're looking at is RedCineX. Now, RedCineX is our completely free program I showed you earlier. This is where I could start to group my files in my individual folders here. And notice you're going to see my cowboy right over here. And let's find my cowboy again. Here's my cowboy. And notice that it is raw. I could always go back to the M and go back to the original metadata, or I could change the ISO like you're seeing it right there. But at any point, I just hit that M and it's going to go back to the original metadata. That's that flexibility of working with the raw file. Now, before we came in here, I went ahead and created a couple of looks, and you could go ahead and preview them, or I've already brought them in here to my look memories. And this is what allows me to say, do you like look 1, or look 2, or look 3, 4, or 5? I actually like look 5, which is a look minus a stop or plus a stop with a 3D LUT, and I've added a little small curve. So notice all of that is applied to this clip, but it's not necessarily on this clip. How would I make it so that all of my clips are the same? That's where you go to your folder, you create your look, right? This is my look right here, and I'm going to do this to all my clips. Now watch all of these clips over here and apply, and that's what allows me to have a consistent look, a consistent grade, a consistent 3D LUT, even though I may have been shooting with a RED camera that didn't allow for that same 3D LUT in camera. Or maybe I wasn't always shooting on a Monster, I was shooting on a Dragon X, and I want to apply that same look to the Dragon X, and notice I just applied that same look to a completely different sensor. Now, these are different dates and locations, so these won't quite look the same, but that is very flexible that you could say, hey, you know what, go all the way back to the original metadata, and sure enough, I just did so right there. Now, I wanted to point out, because I am a stills photographer here, that if you want to go ahead and shoot motion, you can record motion, do all of your raw color correction right here, and then you can flag individual stills for maybe your photo editor or your color touch, anyone that works with your coloring or your photo toucher. I'm not using the proper term. Your photo retoucher was the term that I was looking for. Why? Because maybe this is a little shady here under your hat. I could always do a second exposure and bracket that and then bring that into my editing program or my photo editing program and then later blend that. This is the raw file here, and if you did want to see this, I'm going to go ahead and export one quick snapshot, and I'm going to export one quick R3D. You can see that those are exporting right now, and if I go to my desktop here and go to my desktop and then my workshop, I think it should be, give me 1 second here, RedCineX desktop. There it is, RedCineX export. So what you're going to see here are the exports that are coming out of RedCineX, and notice this is file W002C003. Here's that W002C003. You can see it right here, And notice that this W002, and let's just group these so they're all next to each other. Here is the TIFF file, and the TIFF is typically what you would bring into Lightroom or maybe Photoshop. I'm just going to go ahead and open this up here in my photo viewing program. And notice the TIFF is 200 megabytes per sec, 200 megabytes. But I can zoom in and see some incredible detail on this total image, right? Pretty incredible detail from a 8K 5:1 raw clip. Now notice the JPEG, the TIFF was 200 megabytes. If we find the JPEG of this clip, it's about 14 megabytes. If we wanted to see the raw version of the clip, which is this file plus this file, notice that that total file right there is right around 12 megabytes, essentially 1/10 the size of the TIFF and smaller than the JPEG. So really, my raw files are smaller than the JPEGs, smaller than the TIFFs, and I have all of that flexibility to then bring that into Lightroom or Photoshop or any of your photo editing programs and work with anything that maybe you shot as a motion clip. And you can see it right here behind me. I'm shooting motion right here, and then at the same time, I don't know if you can hear this, I'm flagging different stills, and then later when I come back and post, those will be individual little witness marks that my photo editor or my retoucher can go back and extract just those stills. So very, very flexible system here, allowing you to both shoot motion or shoot stills at the same time and not necessarily have to bring one of those dual rigs or stacking your camera angles, because really this is the best way to get everything out of the same look and have that same feel. And I'm going to look over to my right. Yep, and I don't see any questions coming in. I want to thank everyone. We're right around 50 minutes. So if there was any last questions, thank you for tuning in for the first 50+ minutes. We're going to cut this right at an hour. If anyone has any other questions on the RED camera system or perhaps on workflow, I do have Adobe Premiere up as well. I could easily show you how we could take all of those same files. This is now in Premiere, and let's see, I think I probably have that same shot where here is my skater, right? And he's going to come up here and do this trick. If I wanted to go all the way back into Red Cine X, find that same shot, here's that shot right here. Hey, you know what? We want to go ahead and apply that new look to that. I could come all the way up to my root directory, apply that to all of my clips. Notice that this clip here in Viewer will change as well. Clip in Viewer, apply, and it looks like that one already had it. So let's go ahead and do a different view so we can just see that that changed. Or maybe we weren't really paying attention and someone used this Pink Panther music video and it says don't use. I'm going to go ahead and apply that here. Yikes, that looks really bad. But notice that all I have to do is come over here into my edit that's already pretty much done. This is working with the raw clip, and really if I wanted to go ahead and bring that color correction all the way through into my already done edit, this is one of the benefits of working with the raw file. All I have to do is essentially click on the clip, come over here into the editing tab for this file, and let's right click, show in folder, or reveal in project. And here is that clip right here. And usually you come over here into the effects tab, and I'm not seeing the effects tab here. Let me go ahead and bring that back up. Usually it's parked over here in the effects tab. Essentially you can come over here and reload from RMD, and that is what it's going to allow you. Here we go. And if you come over here into the master control for this individual file, you can hit this little reload from RMD, and what that's going to do is go all the way back, and look at that. I hope we aren't using this Pink Panther music video look here, but notice that didn't affect any of my other raw clips. That only affected the one raw clip that I wanted to. This is also why I would recommend working with a program like Red Cine X to do that first light first, because then you could maybe go ahead and make sure all of your clips have that consistent grade before you bring them into your editing system. Once again, you don't have to do this system, the workflow that I just showed you right here. A lot of my customers go directly into their NLE. They don't like to do that first pass, but I personally like to do it just so I can get that consistent grade and that consistent LUT across all of my particular shots. Perfect. Well, I'm going to cut it because we're right at 12:55. I don't see any questions coming in. Once again, this is James Lucarelli from Red. You can always email us at solitaryseries@red.com. We'd be more than happy to start an email, and we can always work with our lovely partners at Glazers as well, so you can have that 1-2 combo where you have both Red and Glazers combining to give you that ultimate experience. And really, I want to thank everyone at Glazers for allowing us to present, and I want to thank you all for tuning in. This has been a wonderful Power of Red presentation. Thank you all for tuning in. Please be safe, take care of your neighbor, and go out and shoot something.